Welcome to another episode of the Programmatic Digest podcast. I am your host, Ellen Parker, and on the podcast, I have Bob Regular. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. I love how you pronounce my name. It's got some exoticness to it. I like that.
Did I pronounce, is it how you would
No,
pronounce it?
it's perfect. I
Okay,
mean,
perfect.
my last name is regular. It's very plain, basic, right? So you got a little bit of accent in that. I
Basic.
like it.
That's funny. That's funny. Well. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your last name and what you do. I know you're our CEO of Infolinks, which I ask people around, and I heard nothing but exciting things and positive feedback. So I'm very excited about today's conversation because
Okay,
you're going
good.
to basically demystify the thing about, I don't know if y'all heard it, but curation, maybe. We're going to
Yeah,
talk
it's
about
going around.
some, yeah, we're going to talk about curation as the new thing that wasn't a new thing. We're also
Right.
going to talk about supply path optimization down to quality of the media, how to filter through it, how to partner through the right with the right partner, and maybe we'll throw some definition into SPO and all of that jazz. But
I
obviously,
like it.
before the sexy topics that we're gonna talk about together, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, I'm sure you went to school for programmatic advertising and publisher monetization.
Oh gosh, you're dating me so much, Ellen. So
How did you land it
no,
here?
I didn't go to school for it because it didn't
Okay.
exist. But
Hmm.
so I started in digital media, what we now know as digital media,
Yeah.
as in the late 90s.
Nice.
It's been a minute, and there's definitely been a lot of evolution, as you know. And I started building an ad network in the late 90s.
Hmm.
And in that process, we built an early ad server and start down the process of trying to understand how to make it more efficient, put ads on websites. And back then, we didn't have broadband, so we had dial-up.
Oh, shucks.
Sorry, it's been a while. And
Yeah.
so it took a lot of time for banners to load. And so you had to get really good at, using your bandwidth well and build ad servers that had to be fast to deal with that. Anyway, this was back in the Model T era, and
Mhm.
since then we've evolved tremendously. I've built several what I call either demand side or supply
Mhm.
side companies over the years, and worked on many parts of the business. I've worked on the sales side of the organization and led sales
Yeah.
teams. I love operations and data, so I really enjoy leading and working with operations folks. My true passion is product. I love product and really enjoy that. And Infolinks is the latest organization that I'm leading and started off owning. Acquired Infolinks in 2018, and Infolinks was a reaction for me, seeing where the industry had been really, really going for many, many years, which is this consolidation and sort of collapsing, this fancy term, collapsing of the value chain, which is bringing the demand advertisers closer to the supply publishers
Yeah, yeah,
in all
yeah.
forms. Okay. This has been going on since I can remember, is
Yeah.
there's so many publishers and there's so many advertisers, and how do we get them closer together so you have less stuff in the middle, creating all this chaos? And
Yeah.
so, you know, Infolinks, I fell in love with the company and acquired it. Sounds like the old Razor commercial. I loved it so much about the company. But what I really loved about the company was it had been the early creator of the in-text ads, which were really fancy back in the day before programmatic.
Mhm.
And those in-text ads were based on contextual. You'd see a word on a page and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
could highlight it and you could click it and go to the advertiser.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really like the fact that Infolinks had built a platform of contextual advertising. And I really like the idea or opportunity to work directly with publishers to be able to put very unique ad units on the publishers. So
Okay.
we created some IB units beyond the in-text. And the idea was what we had seen in the previous business I had, which was more of a DSP. We had seen that there is so much ad inventory in the United States and the world. I mean, it's mind-boggling. You can't get your mind around the number of requests and ad impressions that exist. It's in the trillions. And as a result, the work that you do on the demand side, which is your world, right? I've spent many years in that world too. The amount of work you do trying to find the good and perfect audience, to get the perfect performance, and the result is really like mining through this massive haystack looking for a needle, you know? And the reason that we've heard for the better part of 20 years about algorithms and data and trying to make it better is because that
Yeah.
needle is very small in a very big haystack.
Mm-hmm.
And algorithms do their best to solve this,
Mm-hmm.
and DSPs come along, and then the next DSP comes along because they feel they have got a better mousetrap on how to solve this problem. And then data DMPs come along because they've got a better solution on how to target the right audience. All of this is just really storylines towards how do you find, right, that needle in the haystack because it's so big. And so what we sort of saw on the Infolinks side is we saw that very few placements on publishers generated the vast majority of performance. Very few of the locations and very few of the behaviors of the ad
Right.
placements were responsible for most of the performance. So, to sort of summarize it down in an easier way of thinking about it, we found that 20% of the placements generated 80% of the performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then there were certain behaviors, how much time someone spent on a page, where did they come from? Maybe they came from a Google search instead of coming by accident through a link. There were all these sort of conditions from which the placement
Mm-hmm.
drove the best performance.
Yeah.
So while the DSP spends endless amounts of time looking through all the raw data, trying to find the right, what we sort of discovered was this core set of placements were driving the bulk of performance. And so I set out and my team on a mission to take that placement, which is an Infolinks placement,
Yeah.
and go directly to publishers and put that placement on the publisher if they didn't already have it. And if they did already have it, we wanted to have direct access to it. And so this allowed us to go only direct to publisher. So even before it was super cool in 2018, when we started this mission, we were going only direct to publisher, even though the bulk of other companies were aggregators. And so we were going direct to publisher, creating our own unique placement that it can only be auctioned by us. And then we would make the placement behave in ways that maximize performance. And let
Okay.
me give you a small example of that.
Okay.
If a user is not sitting on a page, or if the user is not spending any time doing anything on a page for a long period of time, let's say you got up and you put your mobile phone down or your desktop and you went off to the bathroom and you
Mm-hmm.
got distracted, you made yourself a sandwich, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not a good idea to
See.
keep rotating ads. Maybe keeping rotating ads when there's just no one with any life, no sign of life on the page is just wasted requests, wasted impressions. The likelihood of you generating a viewable experience or a click-through rate or something like that goes way down. So why do that, right? And there's dozens of these examples of behaviors
Yeah.
that go on that generate ad requests that have low value.
Yeah.
And so identified all those things and we said we're going to create the placement, but also the behavior of our ad unit that generates the highest outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So now over the last 6 years in building the company, we have approximately about 24,000 publishers
Mm-hmm.
that have our unique, which I don't know if you're familiar with Jounce Media, but Jounce Media is a sort of a very, very prominent research firm that has categorized our placements as a premium proprietary placement that's
Okay.
direct to pub. And the value of that is we have now a large inventory pool of this high performing, curated,
Mm-hmm.
needle in a haystack premium placements that generate very, very high performance.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
one form of curation, what is curation, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a fancy word for how do you find the needle in the haystack? Do you find the needle through data, maybe audience targeting? Do you find the needle through the placement? Do you find it some other way? The way we found it is to really focus on the placement and making sure that placement outperformed everything else. And so the request that we send in to you as the DSP operator, you can count on, you can have confidence that that set of inventory is going to outperform all the time. And that's really worked really well for us. And then
Yeah.
you as
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
buyer, if you want to layer data on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, right? You can layer your data on top of it for your targeting purposes. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what Infolinks has done on the curation. We're curating the placement, we're direct to the publisher, we're curating the behavior, and then we work with the advertiser to layer data and audience targeting on top of it.
It's very interesting that you start with the placement, almost like the creative messaging, and net it out to the audience, then net it out to the deal. Because at the end of the day, I don't think as buyers we give enough sugar to our creative messaging or to the placement. This is just another
Sure.
size we have to add on. But you know, and that I am not condoning this mindset. I don't think that's the right way to do. I know I'm guilty of doing that still as a buyer,
Sure.
as a former
It's
trader.
easy. It's easy.
Yeah, it's easy to just
Placement, right? I
download
mean,
your report. Yeah.
Ellen, placement is not something that really sits in the DSP as a targetable entity,
Hmm.
right? You have size, you have audience, you have frequency, but placement has never been something that's ever been top of mind in the targeting. And the main reason for that is the naming of placements is all over the map across the
All
internet. There
over.
is
I was going to
no.
ask you your definition of placement here because
Mhm.
to me, size could be placement, format could be a placement, a channel could be a placement, like display versus native, um,
Right,
audio
right,
versus audio on iHeartMedia. Like, just, it
right.
could be
These
so
all can
different.
be placement. Right. But in reality, a placement, not unlike a billboard on the side of a highway or
Hmm.
other types of unit experiences, right? A placement is a very specific location
Hmm.
on a property. And you and I, let's use an example. One of our core placements is what we call the adhesion unit, which is the one that locks on the bottom or locks on the top of the
Uh-huh.
browser. And as you're scrolling, it doesn't move. And
Oh.
therefore you get prominent placement and you're visible, right? And you're going to get consideration. You get audience attention because this unit is so prominent. So our
Hmm.
core unit is that unit, and we have that unit placed across tens of thousands of publishers.
Hmm.
Now, when you think about it, that unit, that placement is a premium proprietary placement.
Yeah.
It's unique.
Yeah.
But if you would want to target that in the programmatic sphere, that thing has dozens of names. And your ability to sort out how to target that special unit is almost
Hmm.
impossible.
Yeah.
So the algorithms try to do it. But then, of course, like all algorithms, it's one of hundreds of dimensions of consideration, and it's not necessarily always the most important, and so that doesn't get weighted.
It's not a
But
focus. No, it's not the main
not a
focus
focus,
for sure. Unfortunately. And
100%.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's
So,
there's one thing I always teach everyone is that the strategy starts with like your objective, then the second one is your KPI, and then it's the audience or the targeting, the geo, everything that's related to targeting, basically. But the last and
right,
final fourth is all about the messaging and the landing page where the consumer you're trying to reach is going to land on. And I feel like this fourth
right,
piece of the strategy definition is often the one that's overlooked, that's not focused on, is not part of my job description. I'm not a creative designer. I'm just going to optimize, like you said, to the format or the size that's having the most viewability rate.
sure,
And
right,
so, which I want to ask you about attention metrics after this conversation, because everything that you're saying to me makes sense. That's where the attention of a consumer should be. And that's the best way maybe
right.
to measure and control it to some extent. But at the end of the day, it's like nobody can control the eyeballs. But I wanted to ask you this question. Um, wouldn't that technology be available to almost everyone? Like if you know that the user is inactive, should you not just pause everything and go dormant until think something else get active? Like wouldn't that
That's
to me is like this is a tech that should be available to all publisher at this time, but it doesn't seem that that's the case, or maybe I'm not understanding.
I mean, that is definitely one of many, many considerations of, how you could maximize the ad experience to get the best result.
Hmm.
But the reality is that there are so many obstacles in ad serving for publishers. First of
Hmm.
all, to make that one consideration amongst other dozen considerations,
Right.
all you do is continually degrade your volume of inventory. You're
Hmm.
continuously putting more conditions on what it makes your inventory ability to send it out into the ecosystem to buy.
Hmm.
So the self-interest in the market, and I'm sure you've familiar with this, right, is
Hmm.
when you degrade your volume, when you reduce as a publisher the requests, you're reducing your comparable footprint versus
Mhm.
other publishers. So if
Truth.
you have publisher A and publisher B, and publisher B keeps reducing and reducing and reducing the reasons for an ad request, then it
Hmm.
becomes very difficult for them to compete with publisher that is not doing that. And so they look smaller. And this is not
Yeah.
helpful, right? When you're
Hmm.
on the DSP side and you're evaluating, well, how big is this publisher for me to
Oh
buy?
yeah, I see what you
Maybe
mean.
they're
Yeah.
smaller, maybe they're bigger. So size matters,
Hmm.
right? And unfortunately, when you add all these conditions, you're degrading your volume in hopes of it being important. And
Yeah.
this goes back to your question initially about, demystifying curation, right? What is the mystery of curation? The word is definitely exactly what you think it is, right? Which is the ability to narrow down a very specific set of things
Hmm.
within, an inventory pool. And that today, when it's being defined in the market as curation, is we're going to put data targeting on it. There are numerous curation companies that are putting data targeting and saying, I'm going to help you reach this audience. Let me give you a deal ID, and I'm going to
Hmm.
only send you requests from this particular audience that I'm going to curate. And
Hmm.
that's definitely a form of curation, right? It's an audience curation. The curation approach we've taken is we're curating the placements and then working with you to say what audience do you want to target against that, making sure that the placements that you're getting access to are going to perform very highly to start with. So it's a different form of it. But then the
Yeah.
difficulty, of course, is going back to what you were originally in the very beginning asking is SPO.
Yeah. Well.
Now, SPO becomes it's like one of the most popular topics in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably
For sure.
probably led by, lots of luminaries in the space.
Yep.
And the reality of that SPO is you have direct to publisher, which is ideal.
Yep.
Then you have direct to an SSP and
Hmm.
hopping through the SSP to a publisher, which is also good because the SSP does a lot of work to clean up and curate those requests. And then you have direct to an SSP and possibly through an Infolinks, where we're direct to the publisher, curating the placement that we control.
Okay.
And that scenario, Infolinks is classed as a reseller, not a direct,
Mm.
even though we're
Sure, because there's
direct to the
another
publisher.
middleman, I guess, right? To the DSPs comes down to how middlemen
Right,
are there, but you're not
right.
technically speaking,
That's
because
right.
your
So
offering is so special, so specific, I mean.
that's right. So that's one of the challenges, right? Is when the IB created the spec, they didn't
Yeah.
think about whether or not proprietary placements were a form of direct. And
Mm,
so
yes.
you have this
Yeah.
differentiation, right? Is direct in the minds of the buyer means truly direct, but there are definitely different realities to what does directness mean. We have this proprietary unit that we auction, and that's the form of directness. But because we pay the publisher, not the SSP pays the publisher,
Hmm.
we will be considered a reseller in that particular
Reseller,
case.
yeah. That's so
Right.
interesting.
So,
Like,
right. Yeah, it's sort of these nuances and details,
yeah.
right? So what we're advocating for is that there is nuance in what is a reseller or what is a direct.
Hmm.
The most important thing used to be about the performance.
Yeah.
The key for the buyer is almost always been about the performance, right? And for example, the performance that we generate is extremely high value, but now that SPO has become top of mind, now there creates confusion in that, well, if you're a reseller with high performance, do I
Yeah.
keep you? Are you still a part of my media plan? In most cases, the answer is yes. In some cases, the answer is, well, no, we only want direct,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the nuances that we see definitely happening in the industry. And I think that pendulum has swung, and I think that pendulum will start working to swing back where
Yeah.
media buyers like you really, really care ultimately about maximum performance.
Hi, my name is Ellen Parker, and I am the CEO and founder of Ellen Parker Consulting. Thank you for watching my content. You are so dope. Engage with it, share with a friend, leave a comment, let me know what you think. But most of all, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on iTunes. Maybe leave a review, that'll be amazing. Here's why I do what I do. Our mission is to teach historically excluded people that look and may sound like me or identify as me how to start, level up, and grow in a career in programmatic advertising and ad tech. I do so because I was one of you many years ago, started as a trader. And so now I get to teach people on a one-on-one basis via our course or our program, our accelerator program, and I get to teach teams. So hire us to come teach this content to your team. Watch them grow, level up their skill set, become more confident, help with revenue increase, become much more efficient, less wasted time on mundane day-to-day tasks that we can help automate, maybe with an AI tool or not. So, and the second way we can help is via hybrid model, okay? So a hybrid model is literally what it sounds like. If you need help and support to activate, we can come in and train somebody to take over, whatever that looks like. So if you're interested in finding out more of our services, please make sure to email us at info@heleneparker.com or check out our website, helenparker.com. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And no matter what, I want to commend you for being here, because if you landed on my content, you're most likely trying to level up on your own and learn and educate yourself. And that says a lot about the type of person you are. So shout out to you, okay, for trying to level up. And thank you again for stopping by. Yeah, and you're right. Like I was just in person a week ago training some junior level for this media holding company. And one of the biggest values is that they have their own proprietary data management tool. And that they are proud to say that they only work with direct partners and not
Right.
resellers. And they have direct partnership with some of, the leading SSPs that we know out here in these streets.
Right. Sure.
And I asked the question, like, what is your definition of reseller? And that's what they were able to tell me, is that if there's somebody between the SSP and the publisher, then it's most likely a reseller. And so
Right.
it got me thinking, and I brought up Infolinks, and I was like, well, you have some cases where, like Infolinks, there's a specific about the creative there. It's like there's a
Yep.
partnership that you can build up from here. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's always nuances. We can
Right.
always look
There's
at
always
we can always look at a case by case. And I'm like, okay, I agree with that. You should look at a case by case, but I also agree that should be some standardizations. But it shouldn't be like generalization, which I feel like are used interchangeably. Like you have a standard that you go by to get you started, but there are cases where you got to go off of versus just on average, we're only going to do this type of things. And so I think
right.
it's a good segue into my next to go back into the supply path optimization, because I
Mhm.
feel like it's curation and SPO goes hand in hand. If you are doing SPO correctly, you should have direct partnership with some of those curators, curators.
You- You're coming up with a whole new
Yeah.
term
Oh,
for
yeah,
us.
it's like too mouthful. Like the people that are in charge of curation,
Curationers.
the curation. And so you should have some level of partnership, or like at least a phone number to call and say, I'm struggling to access this type of inventory. I'm struggling to get this type of audience, or I'm just planning for this type of audience. I'm doing my media plan and I want to reach this type of audience. The brand wants something cool and exciting. What can you do for me? And so I feel like this is when they should pick up the phone and call Infolinks, because not only are you able to control, and that's something maybe you touch on here, but I want to reiterate with everyone that there's beauty in everything that we do. We cannot do the same thing of just one. So if curation is part of your strategy, it should be part of a strategy, multiple tactics. Maybe you should layer again some open exchange. Maybe you should layer a little bit more creative deals from 2 or 3 partners. You don't need 17 of them, please. That's no longer the case. This is 2025.
Right.
Enough of that.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for
Right.
listening.
You're right.
But at the end of
You're
the
right.
day, it's like if you're doing SPO the right way, you should be able to have this in your toolbox. I always define SPO as like your toolbox. What do you need today? Open your toolbox and see which one can give you that particular tool to save you some coins, give you measurement and some control, and then really be the true partner and educator and like the person that's going to hold your hand almost through through your struggle and be like, you're not alone. Here's my shoulder to cry on. Not to paint a cynical picture, but sometimes it is what it is.
It sounds to me like as a buyer, you're in a form of therapy. It's so hard.
We need a therapist. We need supply therapist.
Supply therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Supply
yeah.
path
Scott
optimized
Scott
therapy.
Messer. Shout out to my friend Scott Messer. He loves to say like he's the ad tech whisperer or ad tech therapist or something. I'm like, I never
Got
really
it for
understood
sure.
this until now. But yeah, so what's your point of view on SPO and curation maybe going hand in hand? Like if you do one right, you should be able to do the other one right, or vice versa.
I think it's sort of it's a process of chapters changing. The first chapter
Mm,
was
that's
there
very
were
good.
many intermediaries,
Mm-hmm,
many
mm-hmm.
dozens of intermediaries.
Yes.
Ads.txt came out
Mm-hmm.
and removed, I'm just guessing, probably 50 to 70% of the intermediaries that were really adding no value,
Okay.
right? They were just passing a request along.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of my grandfather had an expression, if you step in the river, you'll get wet. And so these intermediaries would just step in the stream, right, of requests, and they
Yeah,
would
the
make a little
bitstream.
bit of
That's
money,
nice.
get a little wet, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Ads.txt came out and sellers.json came out and created a validity around, do I
Hmm.
have the right, to stand in that river and get wet? Do I have the right to pass on a request? What value am I adding? Is the publisher authorized me?
It's so good.
And that did a great job, right? It was hard because the manual process of distributing and implementing ads.txt on a publisher, especially when you have over
Yeah,
20,000 of them,
that's
it's
makes
not
sense.
trivial. It is a manual process in a programmatic world.
Hmm.
And so that eliminated a lot of folks that were not willing to do the hard work, right, of creating value.
Hmm.
So that's fine. Now you have fewer partners passing on, but it's still a lot of intermediaries that exist, right? It's narrowing dramatically, but there's still those there. I think where we are now is we're flipping the chapter of being extreme, which is to say, advertisers are starting down the mantra, and you just described it, of I only want to buy direct, because the assumption is that only that form of directness is virtuous,
Hmm.
meaning it's the
Ooh,
only way. Okay, it's got a certain amount of advocacy and virtue around it as a
yes.
badge or a seal. When that person said that to you, that I only buy direct, they're signaling to you, right, that they're doing a virtuous way of buying media. And I would argue that that's right, because
Hmm.
that is the path. I would also, though, put in a lot of nuance to that, which is there are many paths that generate different performance.
Yeah.
We see that as also folks that, we work with buyers, and your buyer, not always if you hop through SSP1 is the same as if you hop through SSP2 to the same destination,
Hmm.
or you hop through SSP3. You may get completely different performance outcomes on the same publisher
That's a fact.
depending on what DSP you use and what SSP you use. So
Yes.
there is this working assumption amongst buyers and industry people that all pathways are pure and created the same. And it's absolutely untrue. And
Yeah.
so then you add an additional layer, which is if you are going to do SPO and be direct, is there room for a reseller that's adding additional value,
Hmm.
whether that be additional value through data or additional value through proprietary placement? So, for example, we have this proprietary placement. It gives us the ability to create a high value unit that creates high performance. We can see contextuality because we exist as a code on page. We
Yeah.
can see things like referral. It allows us to target for the advertiser in different, unique ways.
Hmm.
And that's a form of direct,
Mm.
right? And when we work with, let's say we would work with you, you do a PMP, a deal ID, and then we would be able to expose our inventory to you so you have access to it to be able to enjoy that. To me, that's another form of SPO. It's the same form of SPO, right? That's a bit more sophisticated because it's not just a set it and forget it. I only buy direct. I hop through an SSP, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
It's now you're getting selective, you're curating, you're building a menu of greater value by picking things that are going to get better outcomes for you,
Yeah.
not just a set it and forget it approach. So we're going and doing the heavy lifting now of going direct to buyers like yourself
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
setting those PMPs and activating those, high performing curated connections.
Hmm.
And it's been going really, really, really well. And we're learning a lot about what is it you're trying to achieve. You as the advertiser coming to us and saying, I'm trying to reach this and I'm trying to
Yeah.
achieve that. And now we can work with that. And so
Yeah.
it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work in a
Yeah.
programmatic world, right? Where everything is supposed to be automated. It
Yeah. Yeah.
creates
I was gonna
a lot
say,
of work.
yeah.
But
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
we're making good inroads with it. But my
That's-
advice to your buyers would be avoid the set it and forget it and really look at not just whether or not it's direct,
Mhm.
but what is the value in this particular case that
So good.
that particular reseller you may be looking to
So
take
good.
out is adding.
Hmm.
If they're adding no value, understood. But if they're adding some value that you want to be able to extract,
Hmm.
you should pull on that thread and keep going with that and find a way to get more from it.
That is so good. Um, okay. Sorry. The Wi-Fi is acting up.
You had a little bit of a glitch there.
Yeah, yeah,
Little
yeah,
max
yeah.
headroom.
Yeah, but we recorded everything, so it's fine. Sometimes the recording is perfect, so I can delete this part. Okay, so this is so good, Bob, because it almost makes me wanna. You're absolutely right. It's the set it and forget it thing has to be done, and we have to be better at traders and at buyers. Like we cannot no longer do this, but there is situation and instances where you just have so much on your plate, like half of us in this industry. The set it and forget is almost forced upon us. But there are some things internally like they can all do to make that change. But I really wanna, and maybe this is the last question before we close. We go to the closing segment. What would you define? Because I heard you said, are they bringing value? And I also heard you say, is this the right placement? Is this premium placement? And so I'm discovering that the word premium is also very subjective to some extent,
Sure.
or intuitive to some extent. So tell me, what do you want the traders to know as premium? What should we call premium these days? What should we not call premium these days?
Right. So I think to make it simple, premium, you're right, is in the eye of the beholder based
Yeah.
on what is the buyer's expectations that they're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
Okay. Premium they only want to be on top tier one sites. And
Okay.
performance is actually not that important. Maybe it's just really important to be on, I don't know, the New York Times, right? Maybe
Mhm.
there's a cachet to be somewhere.
Mhm.
So other people, it may be, I need to hit 90% viewability. Everyone has a different view of what is premium, of course. I would say, though, no matter what, you won't get fired and you will always find success, right,
Mhm.
from performing. And so I think performance is always a consistent KPI and whatever your performance is. But you cannot have any performance in anything unless your viewability is really strong.
Mhm.
Don't believe in optimizing on click-through rate because it often leads to optimizing on fraud. Okay.
Yes.
But
Mhm. Mhm.
it's very hard to generate performance if no one ever clicks on your ad. Okay.
That's true.
And what is engagement, right? After there is a click and there's been viewability, what is the engagement? Is the engagement to sell a product? Is the
Mhm.
engagement to the person goes through the website? There is an engagement expectation. There is something in performance
Mhm.
expectation. What is that engagement? And so I think that when you know what those answers are, which all good media buyers truly know,
Mhm.
what you're really doing to bring the conversation full circle is you're really trying to find that needle in the haystack of trillions of requests that are going to deliver on that. And I think the very basic start of that is that ad has to be viewable.
No.
That ad has to be clickable,
Mhm.
right? Because it was viewable, it has to have high attention and it needs to deliver on that engagement.
Yep.
So in our case, the way we've solved for that is to only put placements that behave in certain ways that generate that no matter what,
Mhm.
right? Period. End of story. It's the billboard on the side of the highway that's right at the traffic light that makes sure that when you're stopped at the red light, that's what you're looking at.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't like what you see, but at least you considered it. And that's how we sort of define that approach. So I think that's what makes it premium.
Well,
Um, And that's the best I feel that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk to Bob for at least another 2 hours. But we're gonna
I'm
honor your
ready.
time. We're gonna we're gonna honor. Maybe we'll be part two very soon, sooner than we think, because I feel like this conversation was really important, and I really appreciate you giving us a perspective on the sell side, on the supply side, right? Because like we think the buy side, there's only one side to the bridge when there's like, in fact, not. There's always like another side to the equation. And I really am grateful that you brought some perspective to that side of the equation. But leave us with maybe a word of wisdom. What is something you know now with your
Okay.
expertise that you wish you knew maybe in your freshman year starting in the industry? What would you tell us?
Wow, boy, you put me really on the spot here,
Maybe
right?
5 years
Looking
ago
for
then. 5 years ago. Something you knew 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
You wish
Yeah.
you knew now.
Um, okay. So, our industry, probably not unlike other industries,
Oh,
likes to chase shiny objects.
oh yeah.
We've always had a little bit of Hollywood in us and celebrity in us. And so I'm not sure why that is, but we come up with things to get excited about. Our luminaries come up with things to get excited about
Yeah.
and to advocate for and promote. And then a lot of people tend to follow that or lead with that a little, sometimes a little like lemmings. And I would say that, take a moment in a heartbeat, not just to accept it for what it looks like it is,
Hmm.
okay? And use your common sense, right? Does it really seem reasonable that maybe a new targeting or maybe a new measurement or maybe a new compliance or maybe,
Oh my.
some new technology is getting all the rage? It's got
Mm,
panels at the latest conference, it's got new luminaries thinking about it. And just stop and ask yourself, does it make sense? And is it common sense for me what I'm trying to do ultimately from, in your case, the buy side or the sell
yeah.
side or, whoever, wherever you are? Because I've seen a lot of movements over the years. Since I've got 30 years at it, I've seen a lot of movements. If we had the time together, I could go back and decode a lot of those movements that turned out to be
Yeah.
false narratives or
Mm,
over promises and under delivers.
mhm.
And I think a lot of it, you can use common sense and peel back
Yeah.
and say, if I just use my common sense in what I'm doing here, right? Um,
Mhm.
you create more value and you get more success. So that's the one thing that, over the years, um, and I've been a publisher in this space for many
Mhm.
years, writing articles, doing stuff like that, is we just have this incredible amount of thirst in this industry to promote new things that are going to change it, make it all better.
Yeah.
And I start off very suspicious now of most of that to see does it meet the test of is it common sense?
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. Thank you so much for that, because you're right. I think we do get distracted very easily. And sometimes we go back to focusing only on the technology. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. At the end of the day, it's down to the consumer. And so that's the other side of the equation that I refer to, is like, who is the person that's going to get us, or the thing that's going to get us to the consumer. And so thank you so much for giving that perspective. The last 4 years are interviewing. I think this is the first time I hear this one. Watch somebody on the podcast saying like, no, you had this guest come in. No, but like from a perspective of like, let's not chase the shiny object. I feel like that's a really good reminder. So thank you for sharing.
Don't forget, our whole industry is in the sales business. The whole industry. Sometimes it
We're
really
all
desperately
moving
loves
people.
to sell itself.
Yeah, we all in the
So
business of moving others. So, and that's part of selling, that's part of education. So I do agree with that. That's really good. Thank you so much for stopping by.
thank you for
This
having
is
me.
not the
Great.
last time we'll hear from Bob. If they want to say hello or reach out to somebody on your side, how can they do that?
Well, I'm happy for anyone to email me.
Okay.
Still a small space, so you can always reach me on email at bobar@infolinks.com.
Hmm.
So, happy to hear from anyone and offer whatever I can. But aside from that, you can obviously go to our website and we'll be happy to help anyone that's looking for, whatever's important you're trying to achieve on the buy side.
Hmm.
That's the thing. We as an industry used to be ad networks where we were together as buyers and sellers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Inventory and demand. And then we broke apart and now
yeah.
we're starting to come back together.
Hmm.
And I think that there's a huge chasm between buyers and sellers. And I think bringing that back together where there can be more collaboration will help a lot.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
I feel
it
like
was
that's so
really
needed.
it started that way. It became a dirty word, the concept of an ad network, right? For lots of other different reasons.
Right.
It was really nice when you were in the same house, when you knew what it is that the advertiser buyers were dealing with, and you as the system and the sell side could adjust to make it all work together. And now it's almost as if there's a Chinese wall of division so that you don't really know what's going on each side. And
Yeah.
it's a opportunity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I know we have a lot of connecting to do and bridging to do, but I think this podcast is the first one. I mean, a good one to start
Sure.
with, right?
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank,
Thank you for the time.
thank you so much, Bob. And we'll keep in touch. And all of Bob's information will be in our show notes on this podcast, or you can watch us on YouTube. And in the YouTube video description, we'll have all of his information plus some. So again, thank you so much. And if you did like this, don't forget to share it. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Ellen.